This is TVAMD, a podcast about real human issues brought to you by DarkDaisy.com.
It blows my mind that Uwe Boll's never made a Christmas movie. I guess they've just never made a Christmas video game. Seriously, like you guys, you're missing the genre.
They've just released Cthulhu Saves Christmas.
Oh, is that? Well, maybe if they ever make that into a movie, they'll keep him in mind.
Uwe Boll doing Lovecraft and Christmas video game. Yeah. Still just be like not? Jason Statham punching people for no reason.
Yeah, I watched Santa Jaws today, so the bar is low.
Santa Jaws.
Yeah. These shark movies, if they can just come up with a name, because there's one called like Close Encounters of the Shark Kind or something like that. I'm like, you're gonna make that, but you're not gonna make Raiders of the Lost Shark. I mean, that's just money on the table, in my opinion.
Not saying they haven't thought of it.
Yeah, I mean, I should Google it because that could be in production. But I'm just you made it.
They greenlight those things based on the name. They don't like plot. No.
It's just
got a
based
name.
on Steven Spielberg's filmography. What Spielberg
filming
movie?
It.
Like Jurassic Jaws? Is that too close?
And it doesn't matter. Just have some girls in bikinis run around, and then we'll put in something in post later. It doesn't matter what the plot is. We'll make the CG thing tell your plot, and it's fine.
He doesn't own the word Jurassic, and he doesn't own the word Jaws, so yeah.
We just call it Triassic if we need to. Nobody understands the difference.
Triassic Jaws.
Triassic Park. What's he gonna do?
Jawsassic Park. Or Jurassic Shark. What am I doing? I'm not even following my own rule. I mean, that's the one.
Do you follow the
right themselves?
There's a Twitter account that's the Jurassic Park Twitter account. It's just like it's so funny. They just talk about how many people got eaten today, and it's your fault if you go into the pens. And Triceratops is feeling a bit sad today, so give him some extra love. It's very funny.
I have not followed that. Is that an official for like Universal pays somebody to post those?
I don't think it's official anything. Judging by the content.
All right. Okay. So here we are. TV Ate My Dinner is the show that you are currently experiencing. My name is Sean.
Hi, world. I'm Lynn.
And we're going to talk about Christmas horror movies again today. And
I didn't know there was a dress code today, so I'm sorry that I am without hat.
Yeah, well,
I did not get told.
It is Christmas
was there a
time,
memo or something that I missed?
No, we never communicate or plan.
My Christmas tree time. Consists of a coat hanger with some tinsel hung on it.
This is a Christmas show, so this is a good one to be festive in. But
I work retail. I hate Christmas.
Oh, I hated Christmas for a long time, but I'm okay with it.
I like the getting presents part, but I have to get them for myself because nobody gets good presents these days.
I like having a tree. Like in my own house, I like decorating for Christmas. How do your cats deal
with your tree?
They're okay. Like they do like to mess with it a little bit, but not too much. Because they're all scared of everything, it takes them a while to warm up. And I watch them so they don't mess with the lights. It's the only thing I don't care about. There are no low hanging ornaments, so there's not anything for them to mess with. They mostly just like to lie under it on the tree skirt. They're like any new laying spot. But they mostly don't notice it now. It's just there.
Oh, I've had cats in the past who just saw the tree as a challenge.
Well, you get the ones who want to climb the tree or make a big mess. But we don't have a huge amount of ornaments anyway. We have just a few things that we put up, and it's one of those artificial that already has lights built in, so it doesn't invite a lot. I enjoy
fancy.
it.
I didn't go tree anymore. I threw out my tree because I've got too many books in my house. I don't have space for a tree.
Well, we have a space here. I don't know. We're still making furniture decisions, so we have some room to play with. Plus, the living room area is big. Like, it's a big living room, dining room area, so we have a little bit to work with as far as making room for stuff. That's nice. Yeah, we did an episode where we talked about Christmas horror movies before, And I was
I
like,
think we kind of petered out halfway through the episode, though. We were
It
like, what
wasn't
else have we
good.
watched? And we just sort of went,
I listened to it.
Can't
I
remember.
think I listened to half of it, and I was like, do we need to do this as a follow-up episode, or do we need to not retread this? Like, I think we can do whatever we want, because we barely
It's our
covered
show.
it in that episode already. I think if we repeat ourselves, it's fine.
I think we need to focus a little bit more, because last time we had a huge list of movies we were supposed to watch. We didn't all watch the same movies. So it ended up being a bit
Like,
too
have
loose.
you seen this? Like, no, I haven't seen that. Well, it's pretty good. That was like the bulk of that episode. I liked it all right.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Well, have you seen this? Yeah, I hated that. Like, oh, I liked it.
So-
Like, well, there we are then. Like, oh, okay.
We did not agree on Krampus.
We
That was
didn't agree
sad.
on Krampus. But I still enjoy Krampus. But I think the preparation this time is, and maybe at some point we should do like a deep dive Silent Night, Deadly Night, like franchise retro for Christmas. But this time we have seen all of the Black Christmas movies.
Or as the 2005 remake was styled, Black Xmas.
Black Xmas, which is
Black
funny
Xmas.
because it's closer. Like, I watched that new one today, so I'm ready. But
I watched them all over the weekend. Because you sent me a couple of suggestions of what we might do for Christmas, and I rewatched these movies, and I realized that I had watched them all and forgotten them all since last Christmas. So it was great, because I got, especially for Christmas Horror Story, I got to experience that all over again.
oh, that I watch every year. Now that I do
That's a
stand
fantastic
behind.
movie.
If it's like a trick or treat kind of movie.
Yeah.
Or there's another movie called Tales of Halloween that I watch at Halloween that's very similar. Also another anthology movie that I like a lot. But it reminds me, especially in structure, it's a lot like Tales of Halloween, because Tales of Halloween even has a sort of device where there's a DJ in the
Shatner.
town. Yeah, but it's Adrian Barbeau in that, so it's like totally the same. Like I never looked up to see if it's like the same people that made that movie, but it's such a similar concept, and it's a good movie too. But Christmas
I must
Horror
have
Story
watched
is
it
awesome.
asleep last night, because I didn't even remember anything, like any of the reveals. I was like, what is Shatner banging on about? Is he just drunk? And then like it got to the end of the Santa Claus story, and I was like, I remember this.
It's
Oh,
really
this is
well
great.
paced. The way they pace it out, because not all those stories are really good Christmas horror stories, even though
The
they're all
one about the
sort of
girl in
Christmas
the-
themed.
Yeah, the one about I thought that was interesting though. Like each one is Christmas themed, but each one of them is a different genre of horror. So you've got the kids in the basement with the ghost, and that's the whole child is born theme, which is
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
like a nativity send up. So yeah, so it's the
Yeah,
Christmas.
and that ties into the changeling theme, where the cop from that was in
Yeah, and
a
that's
changeling child story.
that changeling story is probably the one that fits in the least in terms of being. I mean, it is set around Christmas, but I mean, that story could have happened.
Yeah, which
At
is sad,
any
because I
time.
think that was the one with the best actors and the most realistic.
And it is creepiest. That kid is super
Yeah.
creepy.
Yeah, the kid is really,
that
really good,
one.
and the two actors that play the parents are really, really good. They're really compelling to watch.
Yeah, you feel bad for him because you know it's going to go badly, and it does go badly, and you're just like,
Like
oh,
as soon
this
as
is
that kid
sad.
walks out of the tree, I guess we're too, because watching it for me, being a horror buff, you know all the genres. So as soon as everybody walks in, you're like, I know this genre, I know this genre. I don't know how they're all going to mesh, but I know how this story is going to end for each of them.
And what was the other one? The family that runs into Krampus.
Yeah,
That one's pretty good.
that's all right. That's one where you get a lot of the
There's a monster
nighttime outside spooky
yarn.
And the whole theme of bringing together the family at Christmas.
Did you get
That.
it? Did you watch Dead End? That was one that I mentioned to you, but it's not like a big Christmas.
Not this year, so probably I have no memory of it.
It's on Prime, so I was able to watch it this year because it keeps popping up on lists. It's a similar premise as when I bring it up because it's about a family on their way to a Christmas trip, and things just go from bad to worse in Dead End, and that story in Christmas Horror Story kind of reminds me of that, where they all start revealing how horrible they are as people to each other, and then it becomes sort of sweet. They do it to the point where you actually feel bad for them, and they bond over how terrible they are, and it actually becomes kind of genuine at the end of it, which makes it a kind of fun story. And then
Well,
they
put it on the list. There's too many of them.
Well, I was just talking about that story. That end is similar though, in that it
Yeah.
paces the same way, but it's a weird Twilight Zone-y kind of story in the way that it unfolds.
Yeah.
But it was okay. That one was okay.
Yeah, I liked the movie. There was aspects where I felt like they could have, because the stories were all so short, they could have drawn them out longer. But maybe I just found them interesting. Like I felt there was a lot of padding in the kids in the basement story that could have been used for a little bit more creepy backstory.
And they all come off as kind of dreary. Like you kind of remember
Those
the thing
kids
as
aren't the
being
best
low
actors.
production, because everything that happens in a lot of those stories is very dark and very monochrome. And the wraparound that they keep cutting to is very vibrant and interesting. Like the Santa story, like they pace that out perfectly, because every time you're like, whatever, they cut to a little bit of that. And you're like, what is happening with this story? This story is nuts. And that becomes the culmination of the entire movie, which is awesome.
Yeah, but like with the kids,
The
I don't
elves
know whether they just didn't choose great actors or whatever, but for the kids in the basement, that story could have been a lot more interesting if I had felt any chemistry between them and the leads. Or anything. I don't know if they deliberately went with boring people, because that's what we usually get for that sort of movie. But like the main actress there's a point in the story where she gets possessed, and she goes from possessed to not possessed in just what happened. And it's just like, did she just not get possessed or what? And then she just walks off at the end. I'm like, is she still possessed?
They're also kind of fundamentally unlikable.
Yeah, they're just
individual and as a group. So it's hard to get into those characters, because I mean, with the family story, they're supposed to be unlikable. So you already know that dynamic going in.
That's all right.
But you're supposed to empathize with those kids going in there, and you're like, I don't really care what.
There's a certain amount of interest and charisma when you have properly unlikable people to watch. So when you're watching The Family, you're like, oh, I hate these people. That's interesting. I want to watch it. But when people are just boring, it's nothing to watch.
Yeah. And that was a neat story, but that was probably the weakest one in terms of bringing something to the table.
And potentially the most interesting with the whole takeoff of the Christian, the Virgin, the law there. They could have done a lot more with it.
Yeah, because when you look at it, you're like, oh, this is a real Christmas horror story. It's a Christmas ghost story. That's pretty cool. But you don't think of it that way, because it doesn't really seem to play. It doesn't matter that much in the scope of the story. That's the backstory, but it's just them all sitting in a basement for the entire story.
A tiny bit of sex.
Yeah. Tiny bit of sex is a good way to describe that.
I looked away and looked back, and I was like, what just happened? I got to rewind. Oh. Well, he's a teenage boy, but yeah. So that for me was the weakest bit, with the premise that could have been the most interesting.
So I'm overall a really big fan of that one. That is one that's fun for me. And it kind of came out of nowhere. Like that movie and Krampus came out the same year, but Krampus was a theatrical release, and that one was at that time, it was a direct to DVD.
Well, it's tied together really well, because that Santa storyline is so strong and so interesting to get back to. And it's so well, just slightly overplayed, so that you know that it's something crazy, because it is being played over by the actors. So you get back to it, you're like,
and they're just so good at it, like, because it's like just this whole like horrible, like Sam Raimi style, like elves turning into zombies, and he just has to viciously murder them, like, and it's done so well that the reveals get you even when you've seen the movie, like the pacing. You're like, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot I was having so much fun with those parts, but I forgot we were leading up to this. And then
Drunken Shatner is just a treasure.
Yeah. Yeah, like they just got him liquored up in real life and just had him go on for a while.
And he's just, there must be like hours of footage of just Drunken Shatner, just because in the end, then they include a few bits of it at the end, and he's just clearly just going for it. Yeah. They just put him in a little studio, send in some lights, and you got some magic.
That's certainly a lot more fun than like the device in Tales of Halloween. It ties it together, but not it's not a connective tissue in the same way in Tales of Halloween. She's there, and that's just as a reminder to you that all these stories are happening in one town. But in Christmas Horror Story, that's what keeps bringing you back to the central story is what's going on in that radio station. Well,
that's what works so well in Trick or Treat, because the kid with the lollipop was an active participant in some of the stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was like the bad guy in some of the stories, and some of them he's just there.
Yeah. bad guy. It depends on how. That's one of the things I liked about Trick or Treat is because the morality of the whole thing is a little bit different, and you're allowed that at Halloween.
Well, yeah, because it's about what Halloween is about. It's like you're supposed to, paying tribute to these traditions in order to protect yourself from evil spirits, and this is the consequence. It's like Friday the 13th. It's like I'm so tired of people talking about the equation of sex and death in horror movies. It's like, look, in Friday the 13th, every 2 steps, someone tells them, don't go to that place or you'll be murdered. Like they're told point blank, and they go there anyway and they die. That's what happens in Friday the 13th. The fact that some of them have sex is immaterial to that. The lesson is if everybody tells you you'll be murdered someplace, don't go there. Just don't do it. Oh, it's a lesson of all the sequels too. They just keep going back. So that's what Trick or Treat, the lesson is there. It's like, just observe these rituals. We don't have to deconstruct that. Just don't do that. If someone says leave the pumpkin lit, leave the fucking pumpkin lit. What's the harm? But we did get a chance to circle back around to Black Christmas, because we did talk about Black Christmas when we were talking movies. We had seen it, and we did have some thoughts about it as being one of those original slasher movies.
Yeah, it was kind of the slasher movie. Back to sex and violence. Yeah, because it does have the girls in the house. It has the mystery killer coming up and killing them all off one by one. But somehow it feels, even now watching it, it feels new because it was before all the tropes started. So it doesn't fall prey to some of the lazier ones that the later movies have. Mm-hmm. That you watch, when you're watching the remake, it really shows you how clearly they were just making a movie. They were just making a movie that they thought was scary. They're not doing these things for trope reasons. They're just doing them because it works. And
you don't know, like there's so many things, and we can start comparing it when we look at the remakes too. But they do so many things that work where you have to have a reason for them to all be in the house. And part of what they do in Black Christmas is that they don't know, and we don't know that the killer's in the house with them. Like we know someone's nearby because people are getting killed, but the calls are coming from inside the house. That was the first movie to use that urban legend. And like, oh my God, he's up in the attic the whole time. He's just living in the attic. Why he decides to suddenly go on a killing spree, we don't know. Don't bother. Why he's in the attic, we don't know. And it's scarier that way. He's just some guy. He's just some crazy guy who's in the attic. You don't always get a backstory. Yeah. There wasn't a sequel or anything. He's like, at the end. And they're like, I guess the boyfriend went crazy and killed everybody. Case closed. And you just cut to him. He's still in the house. It's like we didn't sort anything out. So that was a good wrap up. And that guy's so creepy. Like there's so many movies that do the things that this movie does badly, like the calls and the guy acting crazy and all that. But this guy, the voices that he did is really interesting and weird. It hinted at a backstory, but we don't know what and he's going on about. Because the characters are good. They're all sort of just interesting, realistic people. Like I loved seeing I can never remember anyone's names, but Lois Lane. Yeah, Margot Kidder, isn't it? Margot Kidder. And she's just like smoking and drinking and swearing and having the time of her life just playing this. And she's not played as obnoxious. She's just a person. Yeah, she's just that way. Yeah, she's just that way. Was it Olivia Hussey? Is that who the main? Olivia Hussey, famous for playing Juliet. Yeah, that's right. She in Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet. But what's funny about her is she's cracking me up because they keep getting the crank calls. That's what's going on. But every time she would answer the phone, her phone work as an actor, the choices she makes would crack me up because she'd be like, hello? Who? Like, I understand you're saying you can't hear. Like, but pardon? I think you have the wrong number. If I was in the room with you, I'd be like, what is happening to you right now? Who? And then they know that there's like a crank caller. So she's like, everybody be quiet. Come up here and listen to the crank caller. I'm like, what is going on in this house? It's Christmas Eve and this is the best thing they have going on. And he's just bananas, like in the things that he's saying. But she's she overacts like crazy through that movie. She screams everything in that movie. She gets pretty annoying. The others die quicker. I think it's because she's the one who lives. That becomes particularly annoying because she ends up running through the house by herself, just screaming for anybody. Like, what happened to everyone? Like, they've all been murdered. Like,
I like the police in it. Like, the police are actually active, trying to help her out. They're not just like, well, at the beginning they're a bit like, if she's gone missing, you know, it's the holidays, she's probably gone home.
It's Christmas.
They're fairly blasé, but after people start winding up dead, they take it seriously. They've got the phones tapped. They've got people outside. But then they're just rude when they ring her up. They're like, do exactly what I say and don't ask questions. Why not ask questions? Shut up.
I told you.
Do what I say.
Well, I do like how
Leave the house.
They have the device that's the bad cop. He's terrible at it, and I'm about to lose my job. I'm so terrible at this. The detectives already told me not to screw this up. I have one job tonight, and it's to tell you to leave the house. And wouldn't you know it, I screwed that up too.
What does he do? Antagonizes her, so she just... Like, what? Wouldn't you just ring her up and be like, oh, hey, we've got a message for you outside?
Well, goes to a Friday the 13th thing, too. Is like the relationship of these early horror movies to urban legends. And I was reading The Vanishing Hitchhiker, which is a book about urban legends. And actually, that's one of them. The killer's calling from within the house. Like, those movies aren't necessarily ripping each other off. That was just a popular urban legend that was circulating before those movies were ever made. But one of the things he talks about in there is like there's always an interdiction that is imposed by someone that gets ignored to great tragedy. Like, there's always the cop saying, step out of the car, come to me, don't look back, do not look behind you. And she looks behind her and her boyfriend is hanging over the car, and he's been over the car the whole night she was there. And you're like, well, I told you don't look at that, but whatever. And this is the same thing. It's like, listen to me, life and death stuff right now. Just get
He's just a bit of a jerk about it. But I always feel like when people interact with cops in any of these movies, they always go about it in the worst possible way. So either it's the cops being rude and just being like, just listen to what I say without me having to explain it. And then the person obviously doesn't do that, runs back up to the house or whatever.
Bury the lead, because wouldn't you just say, like, but what? The killer's in the house. The killer's in the house.
Even when he says that, she goes, oh, well, I better get my friends. If he just played a cat and said, oh, hey, I need you outside for a minute, I've got something to give you, she would just be like,
yeah, there's an officer outside waiting to meet you. And she gets out there like,
and she just don't give her any information. He goes from the extreme of no information to too much information. And they do the same thing when they ring the cops and they're like, there's a vampire trying to eat my whole family. And the cops are like, ugh, fuck off, good night.
One of those.
Yeah, and they don't. So if they rang up the cops and said, hey, there's an intruder, they might come.
Which is what you should do in every horror movie. Like, you don't have to
just
say
don't do
the
it. They
next
just
thing. I mean, you want to prepare those cops. It is a dick move to not prepare them for the fact there's a supernatural threat, but still.
Well, usually the cops turn up and die anyway, but at least...
Yeah, you're just trying to buy yourself some time. It's mean, but that's all you're trying to do when you bring the cops in, is you're just trying to trip. You want them to trip on bodies so you can get away at that point.
What you really should do is call the fire brigade. You get more people coming, and they've got axes as well.
For real. It's just another form of sandbagging, because it's all the same thing. Like, piles of dead firemen is just as good to me as piles of dead cops.
You know what? I'd probably bank on the firemen more than the cops in some scenarios.
Well, they're more in America. They're probably more extensively trained. I don't know about other countries.
Depends on which ones you get, but yeah. And they're there to help you. They're not there to shoot randomly. But yeah. So, I mean, as many people as you can get there.
Yeah, because that's the other scenario. You don't want the cops showing up and then you're stabbing the killer when you finally got the upper hand.
That should happen more often in these movies. I always feel like the person walks out at the end of the movie and goes, absolutely listen to my account of things. I'm the only one left alive and I have a gun or a knife and I'm covered in blood. Yeah.
And just incoherent and hysterical.
That's the one, the other thing I liked about the ending of Paranormal Activity, the other ending, where the cops just find her with a body and she's covered in blood and she has a knife and they're just like, yeah, no, we're shooting you.
I don't think
She
there's a
runs
good
them with a
ending to
knife.
that movie because the one they went with was dumb too, where
Yeah,
she just
well-
like turns demon on the camera.
That's always the problem with these ones. It's not really a great way to end.
I don't mean to pick
Found
on
footage
people,
movie.
but it's like more times than you would expect when there's a really dumb scene in a movie, you say, "Where'd that come from?" And someone will say, "Steven Spielberg suggested it." It's like, what's he doing with this? What do you mean? I didn't know he had anything to do with it. He just pops up
He's
out of a closet and gives someone a
not a-
really terrible idea for how to end their movie.
He's just like popping out of cupboards, like,
Is
I am
he?
the ghost of bad horror movie decisions.
Yeah. It's like either everyone is just having a mass hallucination, he's sort of the genie that appears to them, or
He's
he's
like the
reading
anti-muse.
these articles going, "What's this shit? Well, who's saying that? I didn't work on that."
Who's...
Yeah,
I have no idea. What was I thinking? I don't know what was happening.
Yeah, that's the picture they're trying to paint. So I don't know. Maybe I'm giving him
Crazy.
too much grief, but it does seem like everyone like, yeah, I just talked to Steven Spielberg. It's like, how's it? He's like the most powerful man in Hollywood. How is he talking to all these like nothing filmmakers and just feeding their head with bad advice?
Well, I guess that's, I mean, it's something in his favor. He's just like throwing out ideas. He's like, I do all this stuff. And it's like,
Maybe a demon attacks.
maybe consider the idea first. I know it's Spielberg. I know.
Yeah. Have you
It
considered
would be
using
hard
a
to say
special
no.
effect at the very end? Spin it out there.
A bad
It's
special effect.
1,000% found footage, digital, shot for $10 movie. Have you thought about using some VFX at the very end of the movie for no reason?
Maybe
That's
at the
my
end of the
note.
movie, someone's face melts off. Did you use
Yeah.
that before? No.
Don't you think
Absolutely
that
fresh
break?
idea.
We've spent like an hour and a half trying to build a sense of reality. It's like, for what? The movie's over. Like that's his argument. Like, what did break the reality? Credits are about to roll.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Whatever. They're about to go back
Doesn't
to
matter.
reality anyway. So put a demon in it.
Sometimes the ambiguous ending is more scary, which is, I think, why the first Black Christmas worked so well. Because it was, you didn't know why he was there or anything like that. You didn't know if
and
he
it
was
just
going to attack
stops.
her again.
Like, yeah, they get her out of there, but everyone's dead. They haven't caught him. They think they've caught the real killer.
And
So they're
she's
not
just
going back
asleep. Like,
looking.
if he decides to go after her,
Yeah, that's sort of like, you can see this movie as a sort of a setup for Halloween, in the sense that they were like, what would we do if we did a Black Christmas 2? And I'm like, we'd probably do like babysitters instead of sorority girls. And then that was
they're
where
younger.
Halloween
Yeah.
came from.
It works.
But the Halloween 2 was the exact ending that you would have or could have had for Black Christmas, which was, well, it's like the same night in the hospital.
Yeah, follows her to the
Killer
hospital,
comes after.
which is such an interesting idea. Interesting idea that they took it into one of the remakes.
A 2006 remake is like a perfect idea of a bad remake. Like all the bad decisions. In fact, the two remakes are the two archetypes of bad remakes that happen, because the first one was in earnest trying to be a proper remake. It brought in Andrea Martin, who'd been in the first movie, and she's playing the house mom in the sorority house, recycles all the characters, most of the character names and dynamics, and some of the same beats between the characters, in terms of there's a Margot Kidder kind of character who gets drunk, mouths off, and is mean to people, and then she throws up, goes to sleep, and gets killed. That's her arc. And the
Same
rest
as
of it
me every
plays up.
Christmas.
Like, who doesn't
Really?
end up with a unicorn in their eye sooner or later? But
But it makes the big error of making these characters super hateful. I hate every single one of these characters, and they're just. But it's such a very big product of the era. Like in those early 2000s, all the girls are so shiny. They've got the big lip gloss on. They've got the
Well,
hair, and then you've got
that's
the
the
one
priority.
nerd girl. You've got the one nerd girl she's got glasses and bad hair, and she's treated like, I thought she was going to be the killer.
well, they wanted
Because
us
they
to think
treat
that,
her like that.
and then she just died off camera immediately. Like
And
they
she
wanted
just
us to
disappears, and
think
then she's
that
not
she was
important.
one of the killers, and that was the big problem, because this is almost entirely what they did in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. It's like everybody is cast on on the grounds of hotness, like, and that's it. Some of them can act. I'm not saying no one can act in those movies, but that's not why they were cast. They were cast for hotness sake. So in
Dawn's in
Black
trouble.
Christmas, they are
Must
all
be Tuesday.
Yeah.
I can't see Michelle Trachtenberg. Like I'm sure she's fine, but every time she's in this sort of thing, and none of them were. Maybe they can act, but none of them were good in this. I've seen these girls in other things where they were good, but none of them were good in this.
And plus the movie's trying to be over the top. One thing this movie does, like as far as bad remake territory, is because it goes into bad sequel territories. Like they clearly got hold of it and they said, what we really need to do is flesh out this backstory. What's this guy about? Why is he there? Why is he saying all this crazy stuff about his mom? Who's Agnes or whatever? You know, what's the story there? Like so they make one. And it's bananas. It doesn't make any sense, and it's bonkers, and it's annoying, and it's not scary.
But it also kind of felt. So the first half of the movie, or third of the movie, or whatever, the girls are just in their living room with the presents and the crazy house mom, and she's just trying to give out these presents, and they are giving her shit the whole time. And it's just one scene, really. It's just them in the lounge room, and it intercuts with the backstory, because I don't know whether they thought the backstory was too boring or we had to get to know the characters first, but it makes the pacing of the one bit where the girls are sitting around the Christmas tree very strange, because a lot happens in the backstory, like years pass in the backstory, and then we flick back and they're all just still sitting there on the lounge being rude to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't feel like their story has progressed at all. And it's very strange. And then suddenly it'll flick back to them and they'll be laughing at something and they'll be happy. And then it'll flick back to people getting murdered. And then it'll flick back to them and they'll be yelling at each other about nothing. And it doesn't feel like there's ever a progression of character or story in that one bit that they keep flicking back to.
Well, they can't progress because the two remakes do this exact same thing, and it kills the pacing both times. Is they both want to have a death scene very early. But the problem is, in the first remake, which was 2006, I think, they have the Claire character gets killed right at the very beginning. And they keep intercutting to the crazy guy in the sanitarium and his elaborate escape sequence, which has not happened. Like, we're like, is this a flashback? Or is that what, like, because we've already seen one of the characters die, and you haven't revealed that there's supposed to be two killers. But there clearly
such a strange twist.
Would have to be, because you've already shown us there's a killer in the house, and this killer hasn't made it out of the insane asylum yet. And they did the same thing in the modern remake. In the latest remake.
Boring and unnecessary.
No, it didn't.
Like, why do we have to see him escaping for that?
Anything except it had some extra exposition. Man, every sequence stops to have extra exposition for this guy. It's like, why didn't you just keep?
Because it tastes like his mom.
And if you were going to have all of that dramatized, then why not do only that? You don't need in-story exposition if you're just going to cut away and show us all of that stuff. We don't need that exposition because you actually just literally show it.
And all of that extra stuff they shove at the beginning of the movie where we're trying to get to know these girls. So we never get a chance to get to know the girls because they've just got the one bit where they're just sitting on the lounges they flash back to. And it destroys the pacing of the first half of the movie because we're not worried about these girls now because we don't even know them. We're just worried about how this guy's going to get out of this
and they're
jail
all mad
cell
at each other about
the
everything.
Stupidest way possible. He's like, I'm about to get out of the cell. No, you aren't. Wait, where did you go? You must be hiding somewhere. I'll go in.
I'll come in and look. First day at work. Yeah, that was dumb.
But yeah, so the really, really dumb character decisions and that awkward pacing means that by the end of it, when they're all running around like just trying to avoid getting killed, I was so checked out. I was like, I don't care. Just kill them already. I don't even care. Well,
and they keep having to stop and explain who everybody is. Like, they tried so hard with a twist as to who was killing them that they actually have to stop and say, oh, wait, you're the sister.
Yeah, this is Agnes.
I thought you were the man and you're the sister, but you're missing an eyeball because there's a lot of eyeball eating in this movie.
And here comes the brother-father because we needed incest as well.
Sure. Well,
because edgy.
They're weirdos, right?
Yeah.
They're just weird.
And why did he start killing people? Because he thought that's what you do to family members.
Yeah, because if you're a victim of assault or a product of incest, then you are certainly going to turn out to be a psychopathic killer. I mean, right?
Right. It's the only possible path that she could have taken. How did they know that they would go both converge on their house at Christmas time when they're both in separate sanatoriums? Like, there's no...
Yeah, because they said he tries to escape every year. So has his sister just been hanging out inside that basement for 20 years going, man, this guy never comes around.
Basement. It just, they've gone like, we have to put all this exposition in here to explain stuff and made more questions.
It just made it way too complicated. And I have to assume I know this was, at least the time frame of it would have been the time where everything was in 3D. All these sequences felt kind of 3D the way they were shot. Like, not like in your face. Like if you watch that Texas Chainsaw, we haven't got a chance to talk about the Texas Chainsaw in 3D, but there's so many just coming at the camera, like good old fashioned 3D gags and that. This isn't like that, but just some of the way that the contrast of the scenes, it seems like the way they put things in the foreground was a thought to how that 3D process worked.
Random thought, but I always wonder how people sleep in these houses because they're always so lit. They've got like Christmas decorations around every single door and Christmas everywhere. So much Christmas. We don't care about the electricity bill.
For the three people that are going to be there on Christmas Eve, like everybody's
I would not be able to sleep in that room. Even with the door shut, there would be so much Christmas coming in under my door.
That's the weird part of the premise, because in the first movie, first of all, it's like there's lots of them there at first. They seem to like each other, and some of them are trailing out here or there, but it seems very organic and natural, the number of people that are there versus the number of people that end up leaving. Like, it's not hard to follow.
So it's not 20 people getting killed. It's only a few people actually get killed because they ended up on their own at some point.
Yeah, and by the time, like, it all happens in a way, like the isolation, like the whole reason you do these movies about like women being killed in the sorority house is like you get the isolation principles. Like, well, it's just all these people in a house, and then something happens, and usually is they don't know the threat is there, which is why they're not leaving the house. Or I think in the remake, in this one, they were snowed in, like, so they had like an element that made it like where they couldn't leave the house. Like, fine. But at least you establish the isolation, why they're not just running away. That does not explain the second remake, the 2019 reboot.
Does anything explain this second remake? The one thing I really enjoyed after watching the 2005 one and seeing these horrible female characters, getting to the new one and seeing a bunch of girls who actually interact like normal people. Who like each other.
Sort of, they do, but the thing is so front loaded with story. I mean, story just shoots out of every moment and every line. There's so much story. It's literally all over the place, because even when it starts breaking into the core plot of the movie, you find out it's happening all over. Like this, the isolation's not there at all.
Several other houses.
Yeah, it's happening in other houses. They don't have to be there. Nothing's preventing them from running away, even when they find out they're in danger. Like, it's the opposite of why you would do that sort of setup. Like, we're not all trapped in the house with a killer, because the killers aren't even in the house, and we don't have to be in the house.
At this point, it's not a remake. I thought like it's one of those in-name only remakes. It was like, okay, there's not a killer in the house. There's not even a killer. There's a bunch of killers. It's not just a random guy in the house for no reason. It's a big black magic plot, and it's not about just girls because girls are vulnerable in their house. It's big about girls because gender dynamics, and it has to be a big thing about men wanting to kill women because they're getting uppity.
But it's not even well conceived in how they approach that dynamic. First of all, I have a problem. Like, you're looking at toxic masculinity in the frats, which I think you're spot on.
Absolutely is a thing.
As your counterpoint to that, you're offering the female counterpoint through sororities. And I don't see that. I don't see those as the opposing forces of femininity versus toxic masculinity, because those two institutions are very interconnected. Like, so there's a different criticism that you could have of sororities, but I don't think it would have been better to have someone who was sort of outside of that fraternity sorority sort of society, and that was the target. But they wanted to be men versus women. They were like, well, men are fraternities and women are sororities. It's like, that is a myopic point of view in terms of
because the sororities have all the same problems, just different gendered.
Yeah, I mean, toxic masculinity is definitely a different and more profound problem than the toxic aspects that you would find in a sorority. But
still potentially a toxic atmosphere.
As either end of the spectrum is like, that already makes the movie not work.
And the way that they try to just portray a bunch of women living together will only just be happy and harmonious, and they'll be sharing tampons all day long, because that's what women do when they lose their menstrual cup.
Which is not what happens anyway. They spend the entire time fighting. Like the central argument at the beginning of the movie was her refuting this. Women aren't just emotional. We're intellectual. Like this idea that people put forward that we're just emotional creatures and men are intellectual creatures. We reject that. It's like, you guys spend the rest of the movie fighting about nothing. Most of the time. And you band together at the end and you win and all that kind of stuff. But it's a very muddled message. And the fact, and it's a movie so on the nose that I actually thought they were messing with us. Like Cary Elwes.
Well, especially with Cary Elwes, because you can't.
The bad guy that I almost think he can't be the bad guy.
He can't deliver a line without seeming like the bad guy. Even if he was going to be secretly the good guy at the end, you would never believe it, because Cary Elwes feels like the bad guy at this point.
His British accent is even more British than Cary Elwes is normally British. It seems like he's putting on a fake accent. The man's actually British. That's
and I'm sure he's
how the bad guy he is in this movie from the very start.
And I'm sure he's lovely in person, but he just, in the first scene with him, and he's like, don't believe all the bad things about me. It's all just bunkum. Anyway, we're going to really read the classics, by which I mean things written by white men. And you're like, oh, he's the baddie?
And
okay.
What if I told you that this idiotic thing was actually written by a woman? Wouldn't that make you think a little differently? Well, no, I've heard bad faith arguments before. So every time you think, are they messing with us? Is this going to turn around? Because she catches him. He's got a hit list with all her friends' names on it. And you're like, can that really be what it looks like?
And there's a point in the movie where he gives a very thinly veiled threat, which is a bad threat because it wouldn't be slander, because she didn't name anyone. So screw you, you don't know the law. But he's so clearly the bad guy. And then none of the other men have character other than rapists and black guy who is not bad.
Yes.
Because he's black.
Everybody is like, you're sort of questionably ethnic, so you're not as bad as the totally white bad guys.
Which, is that problematic in itself?
It's weird. It seems tone deaf in every way, because people, like, you would think, well, wait a second, now you're just saying, like, I feel like you're co-opting race and bringing it in here where maybe that they don't want to be included. It's like, hold up, leave me out of your
This is some white people nonsense.
Yeah, this is some white people shit if I ever saw it. So just leave that out. Like, let's not do the black friend tropes, but they do. Yeah,
and then and the whole idea that she was raped, and then this is her end of that. She's fine now because she killed the people.
That's her catharsis. What annoys me about that, again, is the movie's so front-loaded with story that happens before the start of the movie. That's premise for the character. And I don't have a problem with that being her backstory, because that's where the character starts out and it drives her arc. But they tell us 10 times, and then there are also flashbacks. And so the narrative pushes that a lot, to the point that what seems to be the inciting incident in the movie is this incident where they do like a song routine where they say, and you're rapists, and they high five like, we did it, we killed toxic masculinity, we won, we ended rape.
Wore short skirts and sang about it.
Sang a sexy song about rape. We did it.
We got it. We got it.
Which is actually a really catchy song, and I've had it in my head all day. But
It could have.
Slip me
It could
roofie
have
and his
worked.
dick.
But
Yeah.
then it turns out that it doesn't matter, because when we find out that the fraternity
People are already
went
getting
evil,
killed at that point.
they were killing like every sorority. They hit every sorority, because it turns out when you ask incels who they want to kill, like when they're at
all of
that
the
level,
girls.
they're like, we've all got a list. like I don't even know why the professor had to keep a list. Like those guys,
Yeah,
like
it ended up just being all of the girls.
he's
They
like,
just killed
let's
all of the
get
girls.
together and see who we want. Let me stop you right there, professor. Just tell me when. All
And
right?
they tried to do a little thing at the end where they're like, oh no, they only hit this one and this one because they wouldn't come to their party, was one of the reasons. One of them this was like, oh, they were conscientiously objecting. And then someone else, they said something about them being some sort of warrior for some
There's
social
so
justice.
many ways to do that well. Did you watch the first season of The Purge when they did the Purge TV show?
No.
Well, the Purge TV show is actually really good, but what I like about it is the bad guy at the end who has his purge list when he finally is just going through all of them, like how they got on the list. There's like literally just comes down to a girl where he held the door for her and she didn't say thank you. It's like after a while, it's like when someone's nuts like that, like
Yeah.
you don't get on their list by anything you did.
Yeah.
And that's what the movie doesn't seem to frame properly, because they're like, well, you made a huge deal about this big thing that visibly pissed off the entire frat and almost all of the men by association, or just by indirect association, just being there in the vicinity. There's like only one man in the entire movie who says, I think it's cool that you did that. Even the boyfriend was like, hey, you know, we're not all bad.
What did you think was going to happen?
It's like, dude,
not all men.
What are you saying to your
Read the
girlfriend and all her friends? Yeah. Are you out of your mind?
But like, read the room. This is a rape victim processing her trauma. This is not the correct time to be like, yeah, but not all men.
Yeah. And it comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, because he just suddenly, it's like, are they trying to make the yes all men argument by making him, or is this the rape culture thing?
This guy, I honestly thought was the gay friend. Like, until that moment, I thought he was like all of their friend together. Like, and Megan's like, no, he's been kissing the other girl.
Are you sure?
mean, I'm not making judgments either way. That could still happen. But his dynamic did not seem like one of their boyfriends. He seemed like he was, because he's like, come on, girls, we have to make it to buy the Christmas tree. Like, I thought he was in the sorority. Not
that would be progressive.
But I just mean he was one of the group of friends, I thought. And then at that moment,
then even at the end, she's like,
around.
She's like, oh, I know I drag my boyfriend along everywhere, but I prefer it when it's just us girls.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so even in the end, like, he gets murdered. He gets killed too. He tries.
I don't know. There's
tries
a whole
to help.
thing.
Yeah,
Well,
it's just
the dog
they had this
whistle,
idea and they just
Megan pointed that out, where the signal that makes them start to go crazy. She's like, it's a dog whistle. It's like, oh, God damn it. It is a dog whistle, too. It's like, there's nothing subtle in the movie that makes them just man up and go aggro. But that's not the thing that makes them crazy. That's unrelated, because they have to be inducted and anointed with the black tar.
But apparently they don't even have to agree with that. So it really takes away from it, because they don't have to agree to have the black tar on their face.
Yeah.
So these kids could legit just be zombies who don't believe any of this stuff.
And all got burned alive at the end, but the one guy we knew. Like the rest
one
of
guy
them
who got out
could have
quickly enough.
also been victims.
Yeah,
But
they could have all just been like unsuspecting victims of, and I guess if we're going to talk real, that's how it does work in real culture. Like, a lot of guys are unsuspecting victims of toxic masculinity and rape culture and that sort of thing, because that's what they're brought up in and that's what their friends are and that's what they do. They were trapped in this. So rather than burning them down, maybe there's other options for people who are actually victims of this.
Or if that's your metaphor, there are interesting ways to try to explore that, but they don't. Did you ever see in the new Twilight Zone, they had an episode where like a meteor came down, and as all the men came in contact with the meteor stuff or whatever, they just go toxic male, like just full aggro male, like
Alpha.
but by the end, like one of them, like the lady's son, gets exposed and he fights it off. And that's what they end up saying at the end. It's like, well, this didn't make those guys different than what they already were, because you still have a choice. Even if you're exposed to that toxic culture and those influences, you still choose how to behave and who you are as a person. And it was a really deep cut in that episode. It was interesting.
I thought that's what they were going to do with the black guy. I thought they were going to bring him in, and he's just like, no, I'm fighting this. I'm a good dude. You can try and put your circle on my head all you like, but I'm going to fight out. And he sort of has a moment where you think at the end, you're like, is he going to break out? And he's like, they're like, you got a problem, bro? And he's like, no, bro, I'm so bro. Mm-hmm. And then the girls have to come in, and then he's like, oh, it wasn't me all along. Yeah,
it was weak. It was weak, and it was weird. I like kind of the concept of what they were doing with that. There's certainly a movie there.
Yeah,
just not
had
this
some
one.
good, interesting ideas.
Like, you could really explore that. It'd be fun. But I honestly thought at the beginning of the movie, because I'm like, this is set up so thick as to where it's headed, that I would love if at the talent show, when they start doing their little song and dance, if all of a sudden, like, the other sorority sisters just come in, lock the doors, and they start murdering everybody in the room. And then the subversion of the movie was that it's them going after all of the toxic males, and that becomes the movie. You're like, that would be fun. But every step of the way, you're like, it'd be interesting if they didn't do exactly the thing it looks like they're about to do. But, well, shit, they did exactly what they set it up.
Because it is an interesting story about a woman who's had her power taken away by a man in the worst possible way. And she finds herself in learning to fight back. And that's an interesting story. That's an interesting arc. But the way they have it at the end is just zombie goop. And
yeah, she just kills all the men. Is like, I'm not sure the metaphor there is all, we just destroyed every male. And problem
just all
solved.
of the men. Yeah. It works. I mean, that's what the guys are trying to do to them, rather than working together. And then the really weird bit with the one girl who wants to be subservient,
but just
gets her neck snapped.
Yeah. Well, see, that's what I mean. If you're trying to, if that's an element you want to bring in, then the weird relationship of fraternities and sororities in a college campus would be an interesting sort of relationship to exploit there.
Yeah, you could have zombie bimbo girls as well.
But they didn't do that, because all the protagonists are also, and it feels weird that all of these, like, extremely progressive women from very different backgrounds all decided to come to this clearly exclusive male dominated like college, and they're like, we got to change all this. Like, I appreciate your pluck, but I just don't see what drew you here in the first place. Like, why did you aspire to come to this? This had to be a hard school to get into. Like, why did you choose this school?
There's a lot of issues like that. Don't go to that guy's class. Like,
why are you taking that guy's class? Yeah, exactly.
Is literary classics the only class that you can take to get your major or whatever? Like, and if you don't like it, I don't know.
He's the only English 101 teacher there.
Yeah, and if he's the only one who's teaching the classics, so get one of the female lecturers or professors and be like, hey, how about we teach alternate classics this year rather than just that guy, and he's slowly fades into irrelevance. That's what really happens.
A good story has a world that seems like it existed before the story started. And they try to do that because they give you backstory, but it doesn't work, because it's like, I'm supposed to believe that this backstory, this is 3 years after she's exposed the hypocrisy of the entire college, and still somehow when we find her here, she's in an introductory level class, and she's a third-year student. She's in an introductory level class with, like, the worst possible person she could take that class under in the school, and is like, I can't believe the way this guy acts. Like, this doesn't make sense in terms of the timeline of the story as you've laid it out. Yeah. Because they would know all of these guys. And she does. She seems to have a history. He doesn't like her. Like, they have a negative history. Why would you ever take this guy's class? They don't even make up some kind of weird bullshit reason as to why. Like, well, that's the last requirement that I have to have, and I've been putting it off for 3 years, and I finally have to take it so I can graduate. None of that kind of bullshit.
Your dog in the background is
Virgil. What?
Just licking my privates. It's fine.
What I do? You silly boy.
Yeah, but it's sad because, like as you said, the setting is just an excuse to get a bunch of people together in one place where they're all sort of just stuck together. And I've been in a college dorm situation, and at a time like Christmas or like holidays when everyone goes away, because I was actually doing a real subject like science, and all the art students just left because they didn't have any exams because art students. And there's no one there, and it's just like long hallways and empty rooms, and it is scary. And that would be a great place to have a horror movie.
It could be a lot of fun. And
yeah,
I think a dorm
They
would have
lose all
worked
of that.
better than a sorority house. They got handed the beats because this was supposed to be a remake, and they were like, okay, so it's supposed to take place at a college. It's supposed to be a sorority where everyone's getting murdered. And so we take some of those beats, and they take some of them really, like, we'll do a bit with a cat, I guess. If we're trying to honor the first movie, then there would be a big unnecessary bit with a fluffy white cat. And we'll have an interaction with a cop type guy who's like, well, they've been missing for 2 hours. I don't know what's the complaint.
there was like that when they had that bit where the girl was searching for the cat, and they had that wide shot, and she's going in and out of rooms, opening doors, and the camera's slowly following her, and you see the cat come in from here, and she walks in from here, and that's good. That's a good shot, and it's showing that sort of isolation and the emptiness of the rooms and everything, and the dude just comes and gets her.
Yeah.
And I like that bit. That bit was good. So there were bits that were good in the movie. Like I found all of the actors and the characters way less annoying than the 2005 remake.
Yeah, they're put to ill use because everybody in the movie is actually really good. Like, it's a good cast of people. And honestly, the movie is probably better written and directed than the other movie. Like, it's not... It's a weird thing because it's not a lack of talent. It's not a hack work. It's over trying. It's like it's putting too much effort into it. It's like this thing is just busting with story. You guys need to make some choices.
I wonder if it's one of those ones where they wanted to make a certain movie with this plot line about these men, and they were like, handed Black Christmas remake, and they were like,
we'll use this as the vehicle for that.
Yeah, because it didn't feel like it was trying to do anything with the original idea.
Christmas didn't work but especially because the fact that it's Christmas means even less in this version of the movie than in the others. I mean, why are they all there at Christmas? And it does the same thing.
Like, all the guys aren't
remake
supposed to be there.
Because they open with a girl who gets murdered as a cold open. Gets chased down by a guy in a cave and killed. She's not even in the sorority. She's not one of their friends. It's a whole different group of people. Like, at first you're like, what happened? Because you're trying to see which of these people is one of the people that you saw at the beginning of the movie, and it's not. And then like 20 minutes in, they're like, this girl from another sorority got murdered. And you're like, well, what's that to me? Why would
I care?
And that happened before the inciting incident where they pissed off the frat. So whatever is going on doesn't really have anything to do with that. And that could play into what we were saying because, like I said, you don't have to earn your way on someone's hit list when they're crazy. Like, and they could have played that, and if they were trying to play that, I just feel like they didn't play it well.
They could have just kept Carrie Elwes as the murderer and not involved the hordes of brain dead boys.
I don't know. Like, again, what's your metaphor? Because first, it's all the pledges getting inducted into this stuff. They're the ones who are actually carrying it out. And you're like, well, that's pretty interesting. That's an interesting idea. The pledges are the ones who are sort of made the zombies. But then you find it doesn't matter. They'll take any guy that just walks in the room. They'll just put the tar on him and he's good to go. So
and some of them appear to be zombie mind controlled, and then some of them
true believers.
They're not. They're actually just there because they want.
Yeah, they're just like, you need to bow before a man. It's like, I think that the tar didn't have anything to do with this dude.
Yeah, no, he was already rapey 3 years ago, and they established that they only brought the statue in like last year.
Which is also weird. Like, what are you guys actually saying with that? Because it wasn't until we insisted on removing the monument that everything went wrong. Are you guys trying to, is that integrated into the message that your efforts to sort of be progressive?
It was a very confused message for the movie.
What backfired? I don't know. And you could say, well, Sean, not everything in the movie is supposed to mean something. It's like, well, it just seems like they hit us
You
over
put
the
it
head
on
with
the
so
screen
much
for a
stuff
reason.
that it was supposed to be. Like, how many references to ham and pork? I'm not sure what it all is leading to, but they kept coming back to it. But it wasn't a men or pigs thing because they were also calling the women pigs in the thing. So I don't know how that plays into the central metaphor. It's just lazy language of allegory.
Yeah, it was a missed opportunity, that one. Because for all it was crazy, I did enjoy it.
I watched it. I mean, there's some movie, like I had to turn Santa Jaws off and come back to it later because it is not good. I did
Christmas
watch
Shark
Black
is
Christmas.
a specific
all
niche.
through. If you like watching, especially if you don't mind ripping through a horror movie while it's happening, like some are just boring and annoying, and this one's not boring and annoying.
Well, it's time to take a little Christmas cheer and scream at movies. That's one of my most favorite activities.
That is my favorite Christmas activity.